Hi, my name is Lucy Hill, and today I am going to be discussing the Olympic destroyer cyber attack that happened at the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Just as a brief overview of the attack, it happened during the opening ceremony of the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea. The malware used during the attack was a data wiping, destructive malware. So the intent was just to destroy the files on the Olympic computer system in order to disrupt the games and cause chaos and sabotage the games. And it was thought that this was potentially retaliation for the Olympics not allowing Russian athletes to compete. The motivation behind studying this attack is to highlight the importance of having safe, secure backups, also highlight the importance of individuals having a literacy and network and cybersecurity so that these attacks don't happen in the first place. It also highlights an example of destructive malware, malware designed to destroy and wipe data, and then it also highlights the importance of knowing about false flags, which is code planted to confuse who the attacker is. And it's important to attribute an attack to the correct source because there can be political implications if this doesn't happen. So for a little political and historical background, the Olympics were held in Pyeongchang, which is in South Korea. And we know that there have been historical tensions between South Korea and North Korea in the past. Which is why North Korea would be one of the first to be blamed for a cyber attack that occurred in South Korea. But there was also tension between Russia and the Olympics because the Russian team was banned by the IOC for competing in the Winter Games because of doping violations. Certain people from Russia could compete, but they couldn't represent or accept medals for their country. So that could also point to a potential suspect of a cyber attack. For the attack vector for this attack, the initial vector, so where the malware actually came from, was likely from spear phishing. So somebody was sent an email that was disguised to look like an official document from an official Olympic employee or staff, but then when opened had malware inside. And we also know that the victims were infected before the actual attack, so there was access into the system before the attack happened, and we know this because there were credentials that were hard-coded in the malware. So for an overview of the actual Olympic destroyer malware, the goal of it, as already stated, was to destroy the data on the computers for the Olympics. So the goal was to destroy the data of the target host and then take it offline. And they wanted to limit the means of recovery in order to cause a large disruption. So the initial binary file that came from the malware drops other files onto the computer, including credential stealer files and destructor stealer files. So how the malware works is first the credential stealers, you try and take stored credentials from the browser and the system, and then these credentials are used to gain privilege to move laterally through the network to destroy all the files on the system. And then the destructor files are used to do this. So the destructor files are used to delete data and then cause the systems to malfunction and be unusable. So first, it uses the command prompt to delete all the shadow copies. Then it deletes the files that deletes the file that manages backup configurations and recovers files. It then ensures that the Windows Recovery Console does not attempt to recover the files. And this all makes recovery extremely difficult, which is the goal of the attacker, to make recovery of the data a lot more difficult to cause an extreme disruption at the Olympic Games. the destructor files then delete the system and security Windows event log, which will make analysis a lot harder. And then finally, the malware shuts down the compromised system. So the consequences of this attack were actually not that great. The attack only lasted for about 12 hours, and then they were able to recover the systems. But while the systems were down, the app and the website for the Olympic Games were down. So attendees could not access their tickets. So on the app, they couldn't access their online ticket, and on the website, they couldn't print out their tickets to get to the event. And there were also a few things like maps, schedules, and hotel bookings on the app that attendees couldn't access. The Wi-Fi went down, so TV stations and websites streaming the games were disrupted a bit. There were RFID systems for Olympic officials used as like security gates for buildings, and those were down, which caused officials to not be able to enter the buildings. And then the IT staff's domain controllers were paralyzed, and people could not get into the system. They were locked out of emailing and messaging to communicate with others. So as I mentioned earlier, the response to the attack was really quick, and most people at the Olympics didn't even realize that something had happened until later on when news reporters reported about it. So how they did it was they first cut off the entire system from the internet to isolate it from attackers. Then they acquired an antivirus signature from OnLab, which was used to vaccinate the network's PCs and servers. They then reset all the staffers' passwords and then reconstructed the servers from backups and restarted every service. And so the system was recovered after 12 hours. And when they were trying to attribute the attack to someone, they had a really hard time because there were false flags in the code. So they first said that some group from North Korea had orchestrated the attack, but then the US and the UK eventually concluded that it was a Russian group behind the attack. I just wanted to take a second to discuss the false flags that were planted into the code of the malware, as they were a big part of this attack, and explain why it took so long to attribute an entity to the attack. The false flags in this attack were very complex, and there were lots of layers to them. And so the anatomy of the code resembles that of previous Russian cyber attacks. The data wiping portion resembles Chinese linked group APT3, and then the header and password stealing code resemble a North Korean group, Lazarus. So all these different things combined made it really confusing to attribute an attacker. But as I said earlier, it was ultimately linked back to the GRU, which is a Russian military group by the US and the UK. So in conclusion, the attack was a little different because of the nature of it. It was intended for destruction instead of any theft or money or fame or anything like that. There were also no real specific targets or goals. The target was just the Olympics in general, and the goal was just to disrupt it in some way. And then the false flags were also a very important part of this attack because they were very complicated and make it hard to tell where the attack was coming from, which could have dangerous implications if the attack is misattributed to a country that did not cause the attack. And this can cause tensions between countries. And another point is that this attack could have been much worse. It could have been catastrophic to the Olympics, but it was handled extremely well and was sorted out in under 12 hours, which is very notable.